Chapter 1. The Birthday That Didn't Feel Like a Celebration. My cousin slipped a sedative into my grandmother's tea during her 85th birthday party, then told everyone the confusion was proof she was losing her mind. Hidden cameras were already recording every moment, a lawyer was waiting to file guardianship papers the next morning, and control of our family trust worth $22 million was supposed to transfer quietly to her. What she didn't know was that a detective had already found the cameras, a sheriff's unit was on the way, and before the night ended, deputies would walk into that living room and shut the entire plan down. By midnight, the fraud investigation had started, the trust clause had triggered, and the cousin who tried to steal everything was facing the very real possibility of losing her inheritance and her freedom. My name is Megan Whitaker, and this is the night my own family tried to drug my grandmother for money and accidentally destroyed their own future instead. Daniel leaned close enough that I could feel his breath against my ear and spoke quietly so no one else in the room could hear him. "Megan, grab your purse. We need to leave, right now, and act like nothing is wrong." For a second, I thought he was joking. The Whitaker house looked exactly like a perfect family celebration. Soft piano music floated through the living room, warm golden light from the chandeliers reflected across polished wood floors. Crystal glasses clinked while relatives and guests gathered around my grandmother's chair. The party had only just started. My grandmother, Eleanor Whitaker, had turned 85 that afternoon, and my cousin Vanessa had spent weeks organizing every detail of the celebration. Everything looked beautiful. Too beautiful. Nathan's voice cut quietly through my thoughts again. "Trust me, Megan, something about this room is wrong." I turned slightly toward him. Nathan Cole had spent nearly 10 years working as a detective in Portland before starting his own security consulting firm in Seattle. Over the years, I had learned something important about my husband. Nathan did not panic, and he did not guess. When he said something was wrong, it meant he had already noticed something the rest of us had missed. "What do you see?" I whispered. His eyes moved slowly across the room. "Count the people who are not actually part of the party." I followed his gaze. Near the tall bookshelf, a man in a gray suit stood quietly with his arms crossed. He had not spoken to anyone since we arrived. Across the room, a woman in a beige jacket held a glass of wine, but never took a sip. Another man leaned against the hallway wall, pretending to scroll through his phone. None of them laughed. None of them joined conversations. They simply watched. Nathan leaned slightly closer. I counted at least 5 people like that. "Maybe Vanessa invited business partners?" I said quietly. Nathan shook his head once. "No one invites observers to a birthday party. Observers document things." The word document made my stomach tighten. I glanced across the room toward my grandmother. Eleanor Whitaker had always been the strongest person in our family. When the real estate crash hit in 2008 and most of the Whitaker properties collapsed in value, she was the one who reorganized everything. She created the Whitaker Family Trust and protected what remained of the family estate. Even now, at 85, she still managed the trust herself. The Whitaker Family Trust controlled nearly $20 million in properties and investments across Washington. But tonight, something felt different. She looked smaller in her chair. Her eyes drifted toward the window every few seconds, like she was trying to focus on something far away. Earlier, she started telling a story about a trip we took when I was younger. Halfway through the sentence, she stopped and stared across the room, as if she had forgotten what she was saying. Vanessa stepped in quickly. "Grandma has had a long day," she told the guests with a smooth smile. "She just needs to rest." The guests nodded politely, and the conversation continued. But Nathan noticed it too. "Did you hear what she called you earlier?" he asked quietly. I nodded slowly. "Yes." She said Rachel first, then corrected herself to Megan. Rachel was Vanessa's older sister. My grandmother never mixed up names. Never. A small knot formed in my chest. The truth was, my grandmother had practically raised me after my parents divorced when I was a teenager. She had helped me with homework, driven me to school, and encouraged me to apply for college when I doubted myself. She was the reason I became the person I am today. And now she looked strangely fragile sitting in that chair. Nathan's voice remained calm. I have seen this pattern before. Seen what? Someone trying to make a healthy person appear mentally unstable. The words made my chest tighten. That sounds impossible. Does it? His tone stayed steady. Then he lowered his voice. While you were talking to Vanessa earlier, I stepped into the kitchen. Why? Because when a room feels staged, I start looking for the equipment behind the stage. My pulse quickened. What did you find? There's a bottle of prescription sedatives in the kitchen cabinet. A cold wave ran through me. Grandma does not take sedatives. I know. He pulled out his phone. And I found something else. On the screen was a photograph of a document lying on the dining room desk. The title read, Incapacity Evaluation Summary. Below it were several lines describing memory confusion and reduced cognitive clarity. At the bottom of the page was a familiar name, Richard Harlan, our family estate attorney. My stomach dropped. Why would Richard be preparing something like that? Nathan studied my face carefully. Because someone wants legal proof that your grandmother cannot manage her finances. The room suddenly felt different. The perfect decorations, the unfamiliar guests, the quiet watchers. Across the living room, Vanessa laughed with a group of guests near the fireplace. She looked relaxed and confident, like someone hosting the perfect evening. But I knew something about Vanessa most people did not. She had always believed the Whitaker family trust should belong to her. Even when we were younger, she used to joke that one day she would be the one running the family estate. At the time, it sounded like harmless ambition. Now, the memory felt darker. Nathan leaned slightly closer again. There's something else. What? Hidden cameras. My breath caught. Where? Mounted under the porch railing outside, small ones, easy to miss. Why would someone install cameras at a birthday party? Nathan looked directly at me. Hidden cameras only appear when someone wants evidence. What kind of evidence? The kind people bring into court. The thought sent a chill through me. This is supposed to be her birthday. Nathan shook his head slowly. No, this is preparation. Across the room, Vanessa raised her glass and toasted another guest. Everyone laughed. She looked like a devoted granddaughter celebrating a milestone. But suddenly, the entire room felt like a courtroom, waiting to see whether my grandmother would fail her role. Nathan spoke again quietly. When lawyers, medical documents, and cameras appear in the same room, it's never coincidence. It's planning. For what? He studied my face carefully before answering. Megan, if someone can prove your grandmother is mentally incompetent tonight, control of the Whitaker family trust changes hands. The words settled heavily in my chest. I knew exactly what that meant. Nearly $20 million in property and investments, and only one person listed as the successor trustee, Vanessa. I looked across the room again. She was still smiling, still laughing, still playing the role of the perfect host. But suddenly, I understood something that made my heart start racing. This was not a birthday celebration. This was a performance, and everyone in the room was waiting to see whether my grandmother would fail her role.
Chapter 2. The Family Motive. The image of the living room stayed in my mind as Nathan and I walked slowly down the driveway. The laughter from inside the Whitaker house faded the moment the front door closed behind us. Cool night air brushed against my face and helped clear the tension building in my chest. Nathan opened the passenger door for me and waited until I sat down before walking around the car. When he climbed into the driver's seat, he locked the doors immediately but did not start driving. Instead, he rested both hands on the steering wheel and looked back toward the house. Through the front windows, warm light spilled onto the porch. Shadows moved behind the curtains as guests walked through the living room. From the outside, everything still looked like a peaceful birthday celebration. Nathan finally spoke. "Tell me about the trust." I exhaled slowly. The Whitaker Family Trust was created after the financial crisis in 2008. Back then, several of our family properties were tied up in risking loans. My father had pushed the family into a series of commercial real estate deals that looked promising until the market collapsed. Within months, half the properties had lost their value. Banks started calling in loans. My grandmother stepped in before the rest disappeared. She reorganized the entire estate, sold several buildings to cover the debt, protected the properties that still had long-term value. Now the trust controlled most of what remained of the Whitaker family wealth: office buildings in downtown Seattle, a commercial complex outside Tacoma, investment accounts that had quietly grown for more than a decade, and a large stretch of development land on Bainbridge Island that real estate companies had tried to buy for years. Altogether, the estate was worth around $20 million. Nathan listened without interrupting. "And your grandmother manages all of it herself?" "Yes. She always believed the person responsible for family money should also understand the responsibility behind it." Nathan nodded slightly. "For now." The way he said it made my stomach tighten. What happens if she is declared mentally incompetent? The question lingered between us. The successor trustee takes control of the trust. Nathan glanced toward me. "And who is that?" I already knew the answer. "Vanessa." Nathan leaned back slightly. "That explains a lot." Before I could respond, movement near the front door caught my attention. The door opened briefly and a man stepped outside, one of the unfamiliar guests Nathan had pointed out earlier. He walked to the edge of the porch and looked down the driveway. For a moment, his eyes seemed to land directly on our car. My pulse quickened. Nathan noticed too. "Do you know him?" "No." The man remained on the porch for several seconds before going back inside. Nathan spoke quietly. "They are watching the house." The idea sent a small chill through me. Nathan continued. "There's something else you should know." "What?" "I ran a financial background check earlier this week." "On who?" "Your father." My stomach tightened instantly. My father had always chased large development deals. When I was younger, he talked about property the way other people talked about winning lottery tickets. "What did you find?" Nathan answered calmly. $3 million in failed investments over the past 2 years. I stared at him. "That cannot be right. Debt filings say otherwise." The silence inside the car deepened. Nathan continued. "And Vanessa's property management company has been losing money since last year." The pieces began connecting in my mind. "So if Grandma loses control of the trust," Nathan nodded slowly, "the successor trustee gains authority over everything. Office buildings, investment accounts, development land. They could refinance property, sell assets, move money wherever they wanted. The trust would become their financial lifeline." Nathan looked back toward the house. When people start drowning in debt, they look for the nearest life raft. Money does strange things to families. Nathan glanced toward me. Inheritance does worse. I leaned back against the seat and stared toward the porch light. Growing up, Vanessa and I had always competed for Grandma's attention. About what? Everything. School grades, summer internships, holiday dinners. If Grandma praised something I did, Vanessa would try to outdo it the next week. Nathan nodded slowly. Competition can turn into resentment if it lasts long enough. I hesitated before speaking again. I hate even thinking about this. Thinking about what? That someone in my own family might be trying to manipulate my grandmother. Nathan did not answer immediately. Instead, he watched the front windows of a house. Then he spoke quietly. "People do terrible things when inheritance is involved." The words settled heavily in the car. Then another memory surfaced. 2019. Grandma had called me into her office one afternoon when I was visiting. She sat behind the large oak desk where she managed the trust accounts. Papers were stacked neatly beside her laptop. She looked unusually serious. "Megan, sit down for a moment." What's wrong? Nothing is wrong. She slid a document across the desk. I made a small change to the trust today. I read the page, but the legal language was difficult to follow. Why are you showing me this? Grandma folded her hands together. Family money attracts strange ideas. What kind of ideas? The kind where people start believing they deserve something that was never promised to them. Her voice stayed calm but firm. I added a protection clause. Protection from what? From manipulation, from pressure, from anyone trying to trick me into giving up control. The memory faded as I returned to the present. Nathan studied my face. What did she change? I took a slow breath. She added a fraud clause to the trust. Nathan leaned forward slightly. Explain. If anyone attempts to gain control of the trust through deception or manipulation, they lose their inheritance permanently. Nathan blinked once. You're serious? Yes. It's written directly into the trust agreement. Nathan leaned back slightly. That's not just protection. What do you mean? That's a legal trap. I looked back toward the house again. Inside the warm lights, Vanessa was probably still smiling with the guests, playing the perfect granddaughter while strangers quietly observed every moment. Nathan spoke again after a moment. If someone is trying to trap your grandmother tonight, they might be walking directly into a trap they never saw coming. I stared at the glowing windows of the house. The celebration inside continued like nothing was wrong, but suddenly the entire night felt different. Because if Vanessa was trying to trap my grandmother tonight, she might be walking directly into a trap she never saw coming.
Chapter 3. The evidence begins to surface. Nathan kept staring at the bright windows of the house for several seconds after my words faded into the quiet car. Music still drifted through the night, and the warm glow from the living room spilled across the lawn. From the outside, the party still looked harmless, but now it felt like a stage. Nathan reached for his phone. We need help. I turned toward him. What kind of help? The kind that understands how these situations work. He scrolled through his contacts and lifted the phone to his ear. The call connected quickly. Grant, it is Nathan. A pause followed while the voice on the other end responded. Nathan spoke again. I think we might be looking at a possible elder exploitation situation. Grant Holloway had worked with Nathan years earlier when they were both detectives in Pierce County. Since then, Grant had become sheriff of Kitsap County, which meant cases involving financial manipulation and elder abuse often crossed his desk. Nathan listened quietly before speaking again. Yes, family trust, possible financial control. Another pause. Nathan nodded slowly. I understand. We will gather evidence. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. What did he say? I asked. Nathan leaned back in the seat. He said, elder abuse cases are taken seriously. My chest tightened. But he cannot intervene without proof. The word proof echoed inside my mind. If Vanessa files something with the court before anyone stops her, I asked quietly, what happens? Nathan looked toward the house again. Then the court sees exactly what she wants them to see. The thought made my stomach twist. We need to move quickly. For several seconds, we sat silently while the porch light reflected faintly across the windshield. Then a thought surfaced in my mind. There might be someone who has seen something. Nathan turned toward me. Who? Our neighbor. I pointed toward the next house. Lila Roreno. Nathan nodded. The woman who lives beside your grandmother? She has lived there for more than 20 years. Nathan started the engine. If anyone noticed unusual activity around the house this week, it would be her. We drove slowly down the quiet street and stopped in front of Lila's house. Her porch light was still on. Nathan glanced at the clock. Not too late. I stepped out of the car and walked up the small path. When I knocked on the door, it opened after a few seconds. Lila Moreno stood there wearing a soft gray sweater. Her expressions shifted quickly from confusion to surprise. Megan? Hi, Lila. Sorry to bother you. She stepped slightly outside and glanced toward my grandmother's house. Is everything all right? I hesitated before answering. I wanted to ask if you have noticed anything unusual around Grandma's house recently. Lila's expression changed. She looked down the street briefly before answering. Actually, yes. My pulse quickened. What kind of things? She lowered her voice slightly. There have been people coming and going the past few days. Nathan stepped forward. What kind of people? Lila thought for a moment. One woman in medical scrubs. Nathan and I exchanged a quick look. Dr. Nadia Patel. Nathan spoke calmly. Did she come more than once? Lila nodded. Twice, that I noticed. The tension in my chest tightened. And anyone else? She hesitated again and glanced toward the Whitaker house. There was a young man yesterday afternoon. What was he doing? Nathan asked. He had equipment with him. Nathan's voice remained steady. What kind of equipment? Lila gestured toward the porch of my grandmother's house. He was setting things up near the railing and around the side of the house. Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly. Did it look like security equipment? Lila shook her head. It looked more like camera gear. The words hung heavily in the air. Nathan nodded slowly. When someone installs cameras before a party, they are not filming memories, he said quietly. Lila looked confused. What do you mean? Nathan answered calmly. They are filming evidence. The silence on the porch suddenly felt heavier. Nathan asked one more question. Did you see who he was talking to? Lila nodded again. He spoke with Vanessa before he left. Trevor Knox, Vanessa's assistant. The plan was becoming clearer with each piece we uncovered. Nathan thanked Lila and we returned to the car. Once inside, he opened his laptop and connected to the network. What are you looking for? I asked. Court filings. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard while the screen lit the dark interior of the car. If they're preparing a legal move, there will be paperwork. Several minutes passed while he searched. My mind replayed everything Lila had told us. Then Nathan suddenly stopped typing. He froze. Megan. My chest tightened. What? Nathan slowly turned the laptop toward me. There's a guardianship petition draft scheduled for filing tomorrow morning. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. So tonight, they record Grandma looking confused. Nathan nodded slowly. And tomorrow morning, they file the petition. My thoughts raced. Then they present the video and argue that she can no longer manage the trust. Nathan scrolled further down the document. Then his expression changed again. There's another name listed. What name? Nathan read it quietly. Andrew Carlisle. The name sounded vaguely familiar. Who's that? Nathan studied the file. Senior Financial Officer at North Harbor Bank, the same bank that handled several of the Whitaker trust accounts. My chest tightened. Why would a banker be involved? Nathan leaned back slowly. They'll probably claim financial mismanagement. So they create doubt about the trust and convince the court she needs a legal guardian. The plan felt terrifyingly organized. Nathan closed the laptop. When people prepare this many steps, he said quietly, they are not guessing. He looked toward the glowing house at the end of the street. But I suddenly understood what this night really was. That birthday party was not a celebration. It was the first move in a legal war.
Chapter 4. Returning to the Trap. Grant Holloway was waiting 2 streets away when we arrived. The flashing reflection of a patrol light painted slow red shadows across the quiet houses on the block. For a moment, the neighborhood looked like it was holding its breath. Nathan parked beside the curb and turned off the engine. My heart was beating hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. Grant stepped out of a dark SUV and walked toward us with the calm confidence of someone who had seen 100 situations like this and knew exactly how they could end. Nathan got out first. Grant gave a short nod. Nathan? Nathan Whitaker. Then Grant looked toward me. You must be Megan? I nodded. The music from my grandmother's house drifted faintly through the quiet street behind us. From the outside, it still looked like a warm birthday gathering.
Lights glowed through the windows and silhouettes of guests moved slowly inside. Grant folded his arms. "Tell me what you found." Nathan opened his laptop and turned the screen toward him. The glow of the display illuminated the three of us standing on the dark sidewalk. He explained everything: the hidden cameras, the sedative bottle, the guardianship petition scheduled to be filed in the morning. Grant listened carefully without interrupting. His eyes moved across the documents while Nathan spoke. When Nathan finished, Grant let out a slow breath. "You might be right." My chest tightened with a mixture of relief and fear. But Grant continued. "Right is not the same as proven." Nathan nodded. "I know." Grant looked toward the house again. "If we walk in there making accusations without evidence, this becomes a family argument. And the court will ignore it." The truth of that statement settled heavily in the air. I felt my chest tighten again. "So what do we do?" Nathan closed the laptop. "We go inside." Grant studied him for a moment. "You are confident the evidence is still there?" Nathan nodded once. They prepared too quickly to remove it. Grant glanced toward the patrol car parked behind him, where two deputies were waiting quietly. After a few seconds, he nodded. "All right." The four of us began walking down the street together. With every step, the music from the house grew louder. Laughter drifted through the open window like nothing was wrong. But the knot in my stomach kept tightening. The porch light cast a warm circle across the front steps when we reached the door. Nathan knocked. Inside, the music softened slightly as voices shifted toward the entryway. The door opened. Vanessa stood there. For half a second, her face held the same confident smile she had worn all night. Then she saw the sheriff standing beside Nathan. The smile disappeared instantly. "What is going on?" Grant stepped forward calmly. "We received a report of possible elder abuse." Vanessa blinked in disbelief. "Elder abuse?" Her voice rose slightly. "That is absurd." Several guests inside the house turned toward the doorway. Nathan stepped past her without waiting for permission. I followed him inside. The room smelled of candles and fresh roses. Crystal glasses sat half full on the tables, while conversations died in mid-sentence. My grandmother sat in her armchair near the center of the room, looking confused by the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Vanessa hurried after us. There must be some misunderstanding. Grant entered slowly behind us. That is exactly what we are here to determine. Nathan walked straight toward the dining desk near the wall. My pulse was racing as he opened the drawer. The document was still there. He lifted the paper carefully and handed it to Grant. A quiet murmur moved through the guests while the sheriff studied the page. Vanessa crossed her arms. "That is private family paperwork." Grant looked up from the document. "It appears to be an incapacity evaluation." Vanessa forced a laugh. "Our attorney prepared that as a precaution." Nathan spoke calmly. "For tomorrow morning." The words settled heavily over the room. For the first time that night, I saw something new in Vanessa's eyes. Fear. Grant turned slightly toward one of the deputies who had followed us inside. "Check the kitchen." The deputy nodded and disappeared down the hallway. The entire room fell silent. Someone near the back lifted a phone as if quietly recording. Vanessa noticed and her face tightened. "You cannot just search this house." Grant answered evenly. "We can when there is a credible report of financial exploitation." The deputy returned a few seconds later. In his hand was a small orange prescription bottle. My stomach twisted the moment I saw it. Grant examined the label. Then he looked toward the woman standing near the kitchen doorway. Dr. Nadia Patel. She had been laughing with guests earlier as if she were simply another friend attending the party. Grant held up the bottle. "Dr. Patel, are these yours?" Her eyes widened. "No." Grant continued. "Did you prescribe them?" Dr. Patel stepped forward and read the label. "I did not prescribe that medication." A ripple of whispers moved through the room. Nathan spoke quietly. "Dr. Patel visited earlier this week." Vanessa stepped forward quickly. "She was just checking on Grandma." Dr. Patel looked uncomfortable. "I believed Mrs. Whitaker had been experiencing fatigue." Grant turned toward my grandmother. "Mrs. Whitaker, did you request medication for sleep?" My grandmother blinked slowly, as if trying to understand the question. Then she shook her head. "I did not ask for those pills." The room froze. A quiet gasp escaped from someone near the back of the living room. Vanessa's face had gone completely pale. Nathan stepped forward one slow step. The music was still playing softly in the background, but no one in the room was paying attention anymore. Nathan looked directly at Vanessa. "The thing about manipulation is simple." She said nothing. Nathan gestured toward the bottle in Grant's hand. "When someone tries to build a lie," his voice stayed calm, "they always leave evidence behind." Vanessa's eyes moved quickly around the room. Guests, deputies, the sheriff. Nathan finished quietly. "And evidence always leaves fingerprints." For a long moment, no one spoke. Vanessa had spent weeks building that trap for my grandmother. But standing there in the center of the living room, surrounded by witnesses and law enforcement, I could see the truth unfolding in real time. In less than 5 minutes, the trap she designed had already started collapsing.
Chapter 5. Karma in the Rowan House. The collapse of Vanessa Whitaker's plan did not happen in a dramatic explosion. It happened the way most lies end, quietly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to hide behind. Once Sheriff Grant Holloway gave the order, the deputies moved quickly. 2 officers stepped outside to examine the cameras mounted along the porch and side yard. Another deputy began documenting the prescription bottle and the paperwork on the dining desk. The music that had been playing earlier was still humming softly through the speakers, but no one in the room was listening anymore. Guests who had arrived expecting a birthday celebration now stood frozen in the middle of something far darker. Grant turned toward the deputies. "Check every camera outside." One of them nodded and stepped through the front door. Vanessa stood near the dining table, her posture rigid. The confidence she had worn earlier that evening had vanished. Her eyes moved rapidly between the sheriff, the deputies, and the small cluster of guests watching everything unfold. For the first time all night, she looked uncertain. Nathan stood quietly beside me. His calm presence felt steady compared to the tension filling the room. A few minutes later, the deputy returned holding 2 small black devices, cameras, hidden beneath the porch railing and along the side of the house. Grant examined them carefully. Then he looked toward the tablet another deputy had connected to the camera feed. "Play it." The screen lit up with video footage from earlier in the evening. The room went silent. On the screen, my grandmother sat at the kitchen table, while Vanessa prepared tea beside her. A few seconds later, a man entered the kitchen carrying a leather folder. Andrew Carlyle, the Whitaker family estate attorney. He placed the folder on the counter while Vanessa handed the tea to my grandmother. Grant leaned slightly closer to the screen. Rewind 10 seconds. The video rolled back. This time, everyone in the room saw the moment clearly. Vanessa dropping something into the teacup before stirring the liquid. A quiet gasp spread through the guests. Grant paused the video and looked toward Dr. Nadia Patel. "Doctor,
Could a sedative cause temporary confusion during a cognitive evaluation? Dr. Patel nodded slowly. Yes, it could impair memory and responsiveness. Grant turned toward Vanessa. Would you like to explain what we just saw? Vanessa's voice was tight. You are twisting the situation completely out of context. Nathan spoke calmly. Context is exactly what the full recording provides. At that moment, the front door opened. Andrew Carlisle stepped inside. He stopped the moment he saw the sheriff standing in the living room. What is happening here? Grant handed him the document Nathan had discovered earlier. Andrew read the page quickly. Then he glanced toward the paused camera footage. The color drained from his face. I was told Mrs. Whitaker requested a medical evaluation. My grandmother's voice was quiet but steady. I did not. The silence in the room deepened. Vanessa's breathing became shallow. This is a misunderstanding, she said. Grant remained calm. Attempting to manipulate medical evidence in order to gain financial control is not a misunderstanding. He nodded toward the deputy holding the tablet. Secure the recording. Marcus Whitaker had been standing against the far wall for most of the evening. Now he finally spoke. This has gone far enough. But his voice carried more exhaustion than anger. Grant looked toward him. Sir, were you aware of the guardianship petition prepared for tomorrow morning? Marcus hesitated. Then he lowered his eyes. The room seemed to shrink around him. Years of failed investments and financial pressure had finally pushed everything into the open. Andrew Carlisle slowly opened the trust document still in his hands. His finger moved down the page until it stopped near the bottom. Everyone here should understand something. He looked toward Vanessa. This clause was added to the trust in 2019. Grant nodded slightly. Which clause? Andrew read aloud. If any beneficiary attempts to gain control of the trust through fraud, deception, or coercion, that individual forfeits all inheritance rights immediately. The words seemed to drain the last color from Vanessa's face. Andrew closed the document. If the evidence confirms intentional manipulation, the consequences are permanent. Vanessa stared at the floor. For years, she had believed the trust should belong to her. $22 million in property, investments, and land across the Pacific Northwest. She had built an entire plan to take control of it. And now, that plan was collapsing in front of everyone who mattered. Grant nodded toward the deputies. Vanessa Whitaker, please step forward. Her head lifted slowly. Her eyes found mine. For a moment, the anger in her expression returned. You did this. Several guests turned toward me. I shook my head. No. The room was completely silent. I met her stare without raising my voice. You built the trap. She said nothing. Then I finished. You just stepped into it. The deputies escorted her toward the door. As she passed my grandmother, she refused to look at her. Marcus remained against the wall, silent and defeated. When the door finally closed behind them, the tension in the house seemed to fade all at once. Guests began leaving quietly, murmuring to one another as they stepped out into the night. Within an hour, the Rowan house was calm again. Nathan stood near the living room window, watching the empty street. The flashing patrol lights had disappeared. Only the porch light remained glowing softly outside. I sat beside my grandmother on the couch. She reached over and squeezed my hand gently. Her voice was soft but steady. Some people believe power comes from controlling everything around them. I looked at her. What does real power come from? She smiled. From truth. Her eyes moved slowly around the quiet room. Truth takes patience, but it always arrives. Nathan turned from the window and gave a small nod. For the first time that night, the house finally felt peaceful again. Vanessa had spent weeks trying to take control of the family trust. In the end, she walked out of the house with nothing. Sometimes justice does not come through revenge. Sometimes it comes through patience and truth. And sometimes the trap meant for someone else becomes the thing that finally exposes everything. If you have ever seen a family torn apart by money or control, you understand how easily trust can be manipulated. And if this story reminded you that truth eventually catches up with people who try to cheat their way to power, then stay here with us, because the next story might show another moment where patience and truth win again. If you value stories where strength is quiet but unshakable, subscribe.